Yeah, welcome to the Rural Reflections Calling Dave podcast, co-hosted by my brother Dave Nelson in Carrington, North Dakota. Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls, Minnesota. Dave, an obvious question would be to talk about what kind of weather did you get out in Carrington?
Well, we had a rain that I don't think I've seen one come that fast. I was watching my electronic rain gauge, and it was just clicking seven hundredths every 700ths or every 10 hundredths. So it was just, and while I was on the phone talking to Ryan, it just kept on clicking and clicking and clicking, and pretty soon an inch was gone by in just no time. But anyway, if you've ever been to the water park in Grand Forks, when that big bucket dumps, that's kind of how it was here. You couldn't even see out the windows because the water was running down the windows so thick. So we had a good rain. It said 466 here in Carrington. We didn't have hardly any wind with it, a little bit of hail, and we actually needed rain here pretty bad. And the heavy part of it was limited to a fairly small area, especially the city of Carrington. It was, and they even had higher reports of up to 6 inches, and it came in a hurry. But not really a lot of damage here. There was a lot of places where they did have, significant winds and damage, but we missed that. And today the air is fresh, and we're supposed to be 78 degrees. And you know how it is after rain, washes the dust off, and everything seems a little cleaner. And it's just a real nice day out today. So
yeah, it's same around here. Nice and pretty dry, not that hot. I used a quote a week ago from Lonesome Dove, "Here's to the sunny slopes of years ago." And it feels like I always remembered the weather being around Viking. It was nice and cool and, in the 70s and dry out after a rain. And that's what it feels like right now around here. It seems like we always get similar weather, like at our home place, to what you have in Carrington. But unfortunately, up north of here, like Argyle and Thief River Falls, a lot of the area, lots of trees down, and even some damage to elevators. D&D Commodities up in Argyle got hit, and there's several grain bins that got pushed in, and quite a bit of damage done around here.
Yeah, that's the bad part with those straight line winds. You'd think a grain bin would be pretty round and aerodynamic, but it seems to find a spot in them, and it just starts pushing and pushing and caves them in.
I've heard some people say that when they've got a big storm coming, they'll try and top off their grain bins to give them some structural rigidity. But at this time of the year, it's kind of nice to have the grain bins empty, and I think that's what happened. I think some of these grain bins got pushed in when they were empty.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what happens.
Yeah, I haven't heard anybody got hurt around this area, so that's good. But definitely lots of branches to pick up and that sort of thing. Well, now this week we are going to talk about something a little bit different. You brought this one up, this topic, the thresher, the threshing machine, the what is now modern day called the combine, was once called the threshing machine.
Yeah, it's just something. A lot of people out here will park them on a hill, and there's a fellow close by town here that has, 15 of them maybe parked in a row along the edge of his property, and it was parked in an area that wasn't necessarily good productive field. Mostly it's a slough, but for many years it was dry there, and now I noticed they're underwater, the wheels and even part of the thresher frames are underwater right now. So I was just thinking about old threshing machines, and I remembered when we used to watch our neighbor Leroy threshing when we were combining, because he was old school and wanted to make sure that, we kept on threshing in the old way. And he finally gave up too, but he still kept on threshing a little bit. So I was just thinking about them. I guess that's why I mentioned it.
I remember going up to Leroy Gustafson's back in the 70s. I think it was during the bicentennial. We went up there for an actual threshing bee. And there's a ton of pictures Matter of fact, I think I've got that on the Viking Facebook page too. If people ever want to go digging through there, they can see some pictures of old threshers. A lot of those threshers are in kind of still okay shape. I imagine that's because they're mostly galvanized steel and pretty good heavy frames.
Yeah, there's a lot of them that are. There's a lot of stuff that's stored, been stored inside, and it's just been sitting there. And now the age group of people that had used them is gone, and some of that stuff is starting to show up in storage buildings that have been there for years and years, and nobody's done anything with them. So there's probably opportunities to see some of that stuff that person hadn't seen. There's a lot of wood threshing machines too, and I'm sure those don't fare quite as well outside, and I don't think they've had their wood treated, for many years. They used to pour boiling linseed oil on wood and that to preserve it in the old days, but anyway, there's probably some of them old threshing machines that are still sitting around out there, haven't been used for years, but are in probably pretty good shape yet.
I know where there's one out in the woods where I used to have cattle out in the pasture, and the trees are starting to reclaim it by now. I mean, before it was out in the open kind of, but now the trees have gotten grown around it, and I imagine there's a tree growing through some part of it. That's the way it usually is. But that was actually in pretty nice shape maybe a decade ago or so, but I can't imagine what it is like right now. I was thinking about this when you were talking about threshers. It seems like as history moves along, the more progress we make, the more isolation we seem to have. I mean, can you imagine when the first threshers started, people started buying, John Deere 45 combines and that sort of thing, and International Harvester combines, and there only took one man to operate the combine instead of probably a 5 to 7 man crew operating a thresher. It seems like the more progress we make, the less community we have among people, isn't it?
I think so, and I think that's why we see, people wanting to get together at these threshing shows and so on. Even when we used to chop corn together with neighbors or hay together and so on, you stop for your lunch in the afternoon, whether it was the heat of the day and you only had an hour left before milking or whatever, you stopped, and Mom had coffee out in the field, and usually coffee and cookies in the afternoon and sandwiches and coffee in the morning, So, it was everything was an event, The church was the main social center for most communities, and it was really good for community. It certainly has changed, not in a good way, I would say, over the years.
No, I think maybe one of the reasons we aren't as able to compromise in a lot of things is we just don't spend that much time together. We're so also used to being independent. I mean, and that goes back to the combine. I mean, it's wonderful. We wouldn't be able to farm on the scale that we do nowadays without one person being able to operate a large machine that did a lot of work. But it just, for better or worse, it has changed the way, I think, in which we work amongst each other and the way we deal with one each other. And I think one of the things we're missing is, like you say, that sense of community. Maybe that's why people like to get together every once in a while and go through the extra effort of getting a threshing machine set up and doing shocks and taking a tractor and trying to get that belt set in between the threshing machine and the tractor and back it up in the right way and get it taut without breaking anything, and threshing barley or wheat or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it used to be everything had a little element of fun and social value when you did it. Didn't matter what it was.
Yep, sure has changed now. Well, Dave, you got anything else for us this week?
No, I guess as always, just hope for nice weather and no damaging anything, and have a good week.
That sounds good. There he is, my brother Dave in Carrington, North Dakota, co-host of Rural Reflections Calling Dave. I'm Grant Nelson here in Thief River Falls at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio.